Do you need help in your relationship? Or maybe your relationship is going great and you just want to strengthen the bond between the two of you. In any case, tune in to Ask Mama E, a show intended to assist in creating and keeping the strongest relationships. Join and watch Mama E, the relationship expert, using her wisdom to guide others into forming stronger bonds.
Hello, everybody. This is Mama E. Thank you so much for tuning in. I have heard from many of you that have stated that you have enjoyed the topics that we have chosen for you. From those of you who are not aware of what our vision is, our mission in our ministry, it's called In Him Marriage and Family Ministry, and primarily our goal is to teach and to encourage. Not everybody, I often say that everybody doesn't need to be married. So I'm not here to push you or suggest that you marry. But for those who are married or for those who desire to be married, and let me just add a third category. For those of you who have friends or loved ones who are married, that perhaps I can give you something that you can share with them. I am convinced that God does not waste his resources. So if you're flipping through your screen and you happen to run into this Mama E person, there's a reason why. So if it's not for you, then just bank the information. Rest assured that the time will come when you can use it for someone else, perhaps, okay? So let's talk a little bit. Today, I thought about how many of us do not have any marriage training per se. Before we get married, many of us bank completely on what our emotional feelings are about the person and how we feel about them. I'm convinced now that I have lived longer, that there's a scripture in Titus that says, let the older women teach the younger. And for the longest period, I didn't think that anybody would want to hear what I had to say. And so I kept my experiences, my life happenings, if you will, to myself, thinking that I would just be seen as old-fashioned. And that's still true, and that's okay. But I do believe that some of the things that I have faced in life just might be beneficial to someone following me. So let's talk a little bit today about what kinds of things do we need to know, do we need to talk about, that we need to discuss before we get married. I've got a 50-year history with my children's father, what you all call baby daddy. 50 years. And I learned a lot in those 50 years. Not all the experience I had were positive. There were good and bad, successes and failures, but enough came out of it that I feel that I can share at least with someone else. So when we talk about marriage and the family, we must realize that it was God's idea. I know that in the culture in which we live now, we kind of think that we know what works. We know based on television or based on experiences in our past. Many of us get married thinking that we know better. Can I just kind of even share, when I got married, I had never been to a marriage retreat, a marriage workshop. I don't recall even having any books, any tapes. And it wasn't until I hit a rough patch that I started searching for help. I started searching for resources that might just teach me something that I didn't know, you know. What I then have tried to recommend to younger couples or couples that are coming along now, what I have recognized is that perhaps they could use some assistance. Maybe if they could just go to a weekend retreat. You know, I know that many of us say that that man standing behind the rostrum, he puts his pants on one leg at a time. I've heard that so often. But what we must recognize is that the person that is on the stage, on the platform, that person very likely has been gifted, has been anointed to tell you what might, some of those helpful hints. So when I think of me even, and the word ministry basically means to meet needs. So not everybody who is in ministry is someone that's behind the pulpit. You know, there are any number of needs that God sends people to meet, whether it be homelessness or children's ministry. It could be any number of things that God might touch a person's heart for. And I know with me, when I first started sensing this, what I call burden, it was that I kind of wanted God to do something. I saw the divorce rate, and I saw so many people who didn't feel that marriage was necessary. I saw people who were going from one relationship to another and not really being able to say that any of those relationships were successful, were healthy, so that I was saying to God, do something, you know, fix this. And I am convinced that when God said to me, you do it, that at that point, I started to study. I started to invest in marriage material. Now, and I recognized that I had been married for any number of years, but there was so much that I didn't know. There was so much that I didn't understand, or for that matter, agree with, you know? So one of the things that I intend to do, if you will allow me, is to help you understand the things that you ought to know about each other before you say I do. Yes, I want you to have the butterflies. I want you to love him or her to the extent that you can't sleep at night, that all you think of is him. I can't wait to be with him or her again. That's great. And certainly the emotional side of love is valid and is good. But I just want you to know that that's not all. So that before you say I do, there are some things that I'm going to recommend that you know or at least have talked about. Okay, so let's start. These are Mama E's suggestions. Suggestions based on my experiences as well as my research that I hope you will find beneficial. I said before you say I do, but can I just say that if you didn't get any of this and you have already said I do, it's probably still going to be helpful. So store it away and keep it until such time as you can use it. Okay, so what are some of the things that we ought to know and have at least brought up in our discussion? I think one of those things would be your childhood. What are things about the period of time that you were a child, when you lived at home, when you lived with your parents, your grandparents, whomever that were in the household that during the time that you were being raised? I want you to be careful when you talk to your significant other about your childhood, that you be careful not to present an image that is different from what the truth actually is. Sometimes I think when we meet someone that we want to impress, very often we will tell them a story that's partially true, but you want them to be able to, be impressed by what you say your childhood was. So that I want you to make sure that you give a truthful image of what your childhood was like, because it's hard to keep up with the lie. Okay, so you tell them that you were raised in a mansion and, your parents were this and you went to private school and whatever it is that you would have liked for your childhood to be like, but it wasn't. Be careful not to try to present a false picture. Okay, what else during your childhood do I want to make sure you bring up in your discussion? Do you or have you talked about those experiences in your childhood that were hurtful or disappointing? Now, I'm not talking about things that, how can I put it? There were some experiences that we had that either we have not completely gotten over or will perhaps require some professional help to help us get over. I'm just talking about that. I'm talking about in your normal, run-of-the-mill, day-to-day growing up, okay? When I was a child, I was really, really thin. And I had and still have large eyes. I can't do anything about them. But as a child, I was called Popeye, and I was called Olive Oyl. And to the people doing the name calling, they probably didn't think anything of it, but it was hurtful to me. And one of the things that I try to tell people who also have experienced those kinds of things is that, my weight was on the Olive Oyl side, but it was just as painful as my friends who were plus size, so that when we will at least admit that those things hurt us, we can be helpful to someone coming along now, our children, our grandchildren, who will be able to say, oh, baby, I understand what that feels like because I lived that. I remember, and I can remember sharing that with, I think it was one of my grandchildren, and they didn't know that I really understood what they were experiencing because they didn't think that I had the same challenge. Well, it might not have been exhibited by the same thing, but hurt is hurt, okay? So that if you talk about those kinds of experiences with the person that you're going to spend the rest of your life with, it's quite possible that they've had some hurtful things too, or that when you are years down the road and you have children or what have you, you might have an opportunity to help somebody else get through theirs. Okay, let me go on. Did you have pets when you were a child? Now you're probably saying, what difference does that make, and how is that beneficial? Well, I think that a lot of people who had the responsibility of taking care of pets, that's really helpful as you grow into adulthood, because having a pet is really like having a child that you are responsible for. Somebody said that having a pet is like having a permanent toddler, because you have to do everything for them, take them to the vet, get their hair clipped, all of that sort of thing. And so when I say that, it's not a bad idea to express to each other? If you had that growing up, who was responsible for feeding the dog? Did you have a time, a period where you were responsible on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, or did mom and dad have to take care of the dog even though the dog was supposed to be for the children? Just something for you to think about when you're having those discussions. Another thing that I think is a suggestion for conversations with your significant other. What did you enjoy doing as a child? What school activities did you participate in? If you didn't participate, why? There were things that my parents were not comfortable, I think that's a good way to put it, comfortable with us doing. Both of my parents were PKs, preacher's kids, so that they had pretty strict guidelines when it relates to what children can do, what was fun, what we were allowed to do. I'm grateful that there were some things perhaps that we were not able to do, but by the same token, there were some things that probably would have been no harm whatsoever. So being able to say to my husband or to people who were close to me, I wish I could have blank, been in the band. I wish I could have whatever it was. Did you come into adulthood feeling a sense of regret because you didn't get to do certain things? Or were there things that you really enjoyed doing that made you feel good about you, that it influenced your self-esteem because you were head majorette, because you were a cheerleader? There are a lot of things that boost one's self-esteem and make them feel good about who they are, especially in light of the fact that the things I couldn't do, I held inward because of the things people were saying about me that hurt my feelings. Does that make sense? So to a degree, on one hand, there were things you wish you could have done that would have made you feel good about you. And then on the other hand, there were things that you didn't feel so good. And as children, very often children will act out because they didn't get to do what they really, really wanted to do. They wanted to participate in. And sometimes our children can even be jealous or envious of their friends because they didn't get to. Just saying that, in your time of conversation, as you see the relationship growing, that make sure that you've covered some topics. Let me move on. Okay, so another thing that you might want to discuss as you grow is your history. This being a little bit different, a little bit different from your childhood, because your history covers even as you grew into adulthood. But when we talk about history and we can think about our birth order, middle children, they say, respond to life and circumstances differently than the oldest child and the youngest child. Don't know, we perhaps might spend some time later, but as you observe why you feel like you do, why you think like you do, why do you have the relationship with your siblings and those relationships are different, okay? Something to think about. What were your parents like in your household? Did you grow up in a single family household where it was just your mom or just your dad? And did you have, those parents had roles and responsibilities that you came to conclude that the way mom and dad did it must be the way that we ought to do it? Mom cooked, and because mom cooked when I get married, that means I have to cook. The responsibilities in the house, who mopped the floor, who took care of the kids, who took the kids to school, who, all of those kinds of things. Very, very often, we bring them into our relationship thinking that we must do it the same way. As we look at your history, let's also consider your spiritual or religious experiences. You know, did you grow up in a household where you went to church? Did you go every Sunday? Did you just go on Easter or Mother's Day? Was church something that you were taught to that was valuable? Did you have activities in the church, you know, where we were raised in just about every of the auxiliaries in the church? So, you know, from learning your Easter speech all the way up to, you know, taking up the offering, whatever activities there were in the church, we were pretty much trained to do that. Okay. And that, of course, doesn't mean because you didn't that something was wrong with your upbringing. I'm just talking about you being able to compare the difference between your upbringing than perhaps the person that you're dating. It's important that we know these things because as time goes on, you need to know what's important to you and in your marriage. Also, even as you think about your religious experiences, many times we had different denominational doctrines, if you will, so that even though we both went to church, if we believe differently about certain doctrines of the church, many times as time goes on, it could be a source of friction, okay? So I'm just saying, get to know as much about all of these things before you say I do. What about the close friends that you had? I'm talking about after you left your parents' home. What were the people that became your buddies? Who were the people that you ran with? When I asked that, the importance of recognizing that could be whether or not you were influenced by the friends. You know, did you influence them or did they have more impact on you? Who were your favorite relatives? Same question, that you had a first cousin that you were really close to, and there were things that cousin might have suggested that we do. It'll be fun and, you know, nobody will know. Did it impact how you felt? Did it impact how you grew up and what you felt? Maybe because of what your parents taught you and how you couldn't do certain things in their house. Very possibly, as an adult or young adult, you might have felt like it was important for you to see how the other half lived. So relatives and close friends and even persons that as you grew up, you dated, people who you spent a significant amount of time with. Now you meet someone that you think you want to spend the rest of your life with. You need to ask yourself, how much influence did that person whom I dated for 4 years, how much influence did they have? And how is this person different from that one? So in terms of us thinking about this new guy, this new woman that I want to really live a healthy and happy and whole life with. But we never talked about all of these things. My suggestion is that maybe you make a note of some of the important conversations that you need to have with the significant other. There are some topics that I call the real you. And I think that as you get closer to the day that you really want to say I do, or that you have at least decided to say I do. There are some topics that, we haven't talked about because it's the tough stuff, it's the deep stuff. I want to just throw some out, and you think about whether or not there's any value in perhaps knowing what your future husband or wife, how they feel about these things. Number one, political views. When we think about how we might differ and feel differently about politics, that to me is not a topic that I bring up or talk about with people who I'm not really close to, because it is deep and people have hard-rooted ideas about politics. But I think if we're getting ready to share a roof, share a household, maybe at least it would be good for me to know. What about children? Do we plan to have children? Do we, how many children do we plan to have? When are we going to have children? Are we going to wait 5 years? All of those kinds of things. Don't assume that it's automatic that we agree on those things. Medical history. There are things that we need to know about what kinds of things we have experienced. We need to know things that might have a bearing on the children that we bring into the world. Are there things that we saw as generational, things that our parents had, that, other family members might have been exposed to certain things? The other part of medical history is kind of knowing how do you feel about aging? That is, aging of your parents. When you get old, what is it that you expect from your mate? All of those kinds of things are important that we talk about so that we know what to expect as our parents get older and as we get older. Recognize also that some of what happens in life isn't based on age. I didn't expect breast cancer, but it happened anyway. And so if we've not had discussions about what's expected and what we expect from our mates to do with us and for us when those kinds of things happen, another good reason for why perhaps we ought to talk about those things. What about money? Any discussion on who's going to make the money? How is money going to be spent? Is it my money and your money? Is one of us more interested in saving than the other one? Do I get paid and I'm broke again the next day? And then do I have to borrow money from my spouse because I wasn't a good steward over what I had? All of those kinds of things we need to know. I'm not sure that it's not a bad idea for us to know our credit report. What have you done since you've been an adult with money? So that I know if we're going to get married, what I can expect to come from your side of the table. Lastly, and we're going to stop for now, we'll pick up again later. But one of the other things that I think is important is that you know, and that both of you know, who the most important people are in your life. Who are the people that are important enough that you would make sacrifices for? And does your mate know that? Lastly, I want you to think about who the people are who have influenced you. This is not just family, but these are celebrities and writers and people that we've seen on television or whatever. Are you being led by persons who give you good advice and God-centered advice? All of these are things that I just made a quick note of because I thought it might be of interest to some of you. We're going to pick up and continue this topic a little bit later. Until then, I pray that God will give you everything that it takes for you to have the abundant life that He promised. I pray that your household will be one of love and peace and happiness. Until then, until we meet again, this is Mama E, and I look forward to sharing with you again next.
Do you need help in your relationship? Or maybe your relationship is going great and you just want to strengthen the bond between the two of you. In any case, tune in to Ask Mama E, a show intended to assist in creating and keeping the strongest relationships. Join and watch Mama E, the relationship expert, using her wisdom to guide others into forming stronger bonds.
Do you have a business or product? Are you looking to advertise, maybe to get the word out to thousands of people on a daily? You should consider the Inspired Network. We have affordable packages that can assist you at getting the word out about your product or business. Call us today at 866-804-6774.
Your financial support keeps the ministry alive. You can be a blessing by sewing via Cash App today at $TeachJax, or you can text to give at 833-481-1524 and text the word GIVE.
So you've been watching the show. Would you like to be a content provider yourself and develop a show for the Inspire Network? Please give us a call today at 904-389-5592 or go to www.connecttv.info to submit a show idea.
Have a praise report or a testimony of how any of the programming at the Inspired Network has been a blessing to you? Please go to www.myprayerrequest.info. Click on the tab Testimony and submit it today. The IPC prayer team would love to know how effective the ministry is being to you.
Do you love video production? Would you like to have a career in video production, but don't know where to start? Your problem is you have no one to teach you. Well, the Inspired Television Network is initiating its apprenticeship program. We'll teach you video production, how to set up the simple camera operation, post-production, and advanced editing. Imagine sitting down with an expert and being taught weekly how to do it. It's a 6-month program that requires a minimum of 10 hours a week of hands-on training and 3 hours a week of classroom training. You've always wanted to make movies or learn production. This is the perfect program for you. Give us a call today at 904-389-5592 or sign up at www.learntv.today. It's free for churches and nonprofits.
Do you need a morning prayer line? A place you can call to hear from God? Call the International Prayer Council Intercessory Prayer Line, Monday through Saturday at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.